But I'm thrilled to now be able to do this platform because it really is about touching more people with the work that truly brings you to a place of healing. And there's too few people doing that work, and there's too few people as a result continuing to suffer. And that's why we're doing this next crazy chapter in our work.
Yeah, I think, it is so important that we continue to get the message out there that there is this deeper work that is necessary for people to really fully recover from emotional and binge eating. And, there are a lot of other pieces that go into full recovery that are also very, very important. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, things like nutrition therapy, things like, I don't know, lots of other things. But oftentimes the piece that really kind of goes by the wayside that people don't even realize is there is this deeper psychological and emotional work. And sometimes we even call it like the hidden piece. Like it's kind of like there in the shadows, and you don't even realize it's there. You don't even realize that it's affecting you, that it's driving your eating disorder behavior. And we are on a mission to really bring this message to the world so that people stop blaming themselves and wondering, like, what's wrong with me that I can't seem to get this under control? I'm capable and I'm successful everywhere else in my life. I'm a smart person. Why can't I figure this out? And, when the answer doesn't make sense, unfortunately, it's very typical human behavior to kind of blame it on yourself. And so we find these beautiful souls like stuck in this self-blame and ridicule, and it's heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, whatever. And so we know that this deeper work is necessary. We know that just too few people, like you said, know about it and are offering it. And we feel really excited to do this. This can be like a game changer for the whole world.
It actually needs to be, because there's too many people out there that are suffering and they're just not getting the right treatment because people really aren't understanding. Let's go back a little bit. We're gonna give you a little bit more of a formal kind of introduction. Binge eating disorder became a formal diagnosis in 2013. And that was huge. To be able to recognize that there is a psychological component, because binge eating disorder is a psychological disorder. It's not a behavioral disorder. It's a psychological disorder. Okay. So when that became a psychological formal diagnosis, it was really positive. And we thought, yay, finally, people are going to be able to treat all of the components so that people are actually going to be able to get better. But unfortunately, that did not happen. There was still a big divide, and it's primarily this division between the medical community and the psychological community, where the medical community really treats issues of weight with, well, let's just go on yet another diet and let's prescribe exercise, even though we know that that diet for anybody is going to be 95% ineffective, regardless of the diet that you get put on. And if you are able to do some temporary weight loss through dieting, we know that you're going to regain that within 1 to 2 years. And for 87% of the people that go on a diet, they're going to actually then gain more weight. So they're going to regain the weight that they lost, and then they're going to go on to gain more, which we know then creates yo-yo dieting, metabolic issues, and it's just horrific.
Well, and I think the medical field has focused primarily on the symptoms, right? So the symptoms are maybe increased weight due to chronic binge eating. The symptoms are medical issues. The symptoms are not being able to move as readily as you would like to. And so the medical community typically focuses on those, not realizing that those are just a result of then this psychological piece.
People are smart. They know what they're supposed to do. And if you were able to do it, you would be able to do it. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It means that there's another component that's driving that need for food that's not being addressed. So there's nothing wrong with you, and there's everything wrong with the typical approach. And in the area of psychology, what we found is that people were treating binge eating disorder, right? So they were looking at the binge eating behavior and looking at the psychological components, and they were doing cognitive behavioral therapy, which is effective, but still only effective 50% of the time. But even if someone was successfully treated and they no longer were binge eating, oftentimes they were stuck with excessive weight that then didn't feel good to them. Now, if our Hayes friends are listening, please hear me out. This is not about what we think about it. It is what the individual within themselves feels about. And it's everyone's right to say, I want to feel what feels congruous with my soul inside and have my outer be congruous. And that can be regardless of what your weight is, right? So our experience, and we're just talking about our professional experience, was that we would treat people successfully for binge eating disorder. They would say, man, I feel so much better about myself. But I have this extra weight that I gained when I was binge eating, and I don't know what to do with that. And we didn't want them to go on a diet because we knew that that was just going to trigger the binge eating and it was going to be ineffective. So we started implementing intuitive eating skills with our wonderful dietitian. Tomorrow we're going to have a video cast with Amy Reynolds, and we started the Healthy Way Out program. So there was a lot of other pieces, but we don't want to go into all of that right now. But that was 5 years ago, and we had 3 components. We had the physical, we had the nutritional, and we had the emotional. And it's been very, very successful. We have our workshops that continue to run in our in-person Scottsdale facility. They are full.
I just calculated we've run 60 workshops.
Yeah,
Can you believe it?
Woo!
Isn't that great? I know.
That's fantastic.
It's great.
So we started getting more and more feedback and saying, oh my gosh, like this is absolutely fantastic. And trust me, we're not tooting our own horn. It really is driven by like, why isn't everybody doing this? And we would say this over and over and over again. Like,
and so would our clients.
Yeah, like why is everyone not doing this? And so Dr. Ashley and I would take ourselves on like wonderful, like soulful retreats. We definitely practice what we preach. You're going to hear that over and over and over again. Okay. So there's nothing hypocritical here. We are not going to ask you to do anything that we do not do within ourselves. So we always balance work and play, and we always like to do things from a soulful perspective. So we would go on retreats and we just had to go to Maui.
Find my sea turtles. And we did.
And so we were developing more of our programming, and admittedly, we were like, you know, drinking a glass of wine.
Yes.
Or maybe 2.
Maybe. I won't cop to anything.
I will. No shame in that. So, and we were sitting back and we were going, oh my gosh, you know, this person is struggling with this, and I met with this person and they're struggling with this, and this came out in this workshop, and over and over and over again, we kept hearing, and I like literally have goosebumps as I'm saying this, the same backgrounds, the same profiles, the same struggles. And 2 glasses of wine in, we sat back and we said, there's this similarity, there's this similarity, there's this similarity. And somewhere along that journey, we said, this is like inside the mind of an emotional eater. And we literally coined the term in that retreat.
We were sitting on the lanai. Is that what they're called? Lanais?
Yeah, it was amazing.
Looking out at the ocean, and it just spilled out of us because it's so organic and it's so true. And that was, 3 years ago-ish? And, you know, now that we've got it in our head, like we've been just kind of watching it, using it as our template, and it's just holding up. It's truly standing the test of time in terms of, you know, every time somebody walks through our doors and we have the privilege of sitting down with them and hearing their story and finding out what it is that they're wanting to work on, these same components keep coming up. It's uncanny. And I guess that's the piece of psychology that just fascinates me, that the human psyche is actually that predictable in terms of how it copes and what it does in the face of trauma and different distressing experiences. So
what are some of those things?
So some of those things that we've discovered, one is just a very pervasive experience of growing up in a very stressful or chaotic environment. And I guess one really quick caveat as we talk about things from our past, whether it's talking about my own experiences or you, Dr. Julie, or our clients, please know that none of this is to badmouth families or parents. It's just so important to me to say that, because I'm a mom myself, you're a mom, and, you know, we're all doing the best that we can. And it's definitely a belief in my heart that every parent is doing better than what they got. And so as we talk about our past, a collective whole, just please know that it's coming from a place of wanting to understand kind of why maybe our own psyches had to develop these strategies to survive. And it's not to knock parents or to say that they did a bad job. It's just to really understand and acknowledge what is. So just want to put that out there.
Thank you so much for saying that. It really is not about blaming, and it really is about being able to understand, because then what we're going to be asking you to do is not stay mad at your parents.
Right, exactly.
You might have to go through a certain process if you've never allowed yourself to go through those emotions in kind of a healing and resolving way. But primarily, we're going to be asking you to then step in, and with that understanding about what happened or what you might not have gotten, we're going to start looking at what your relationship is with yourself in your current life. And we're going to be helping you to start doing it differently, so that that self can have a different experience, but that's going to be directed and at the helm of you. Okay. So we can't change what we're not aware of. And so if you don't let yourself explore and understand, it's going to be really hard to know what needs to be healed and what needs to be changed.
Yeah. And to offer yourself a different experience, right? Exactly. So that's really the spirit of where we're coming from when we talk about the past. It's just important that we put that out there.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. So going back to what I was saying, you know, one of the components that we see over and over and over again, dare I say 100%, is kind of this stressful and or chaotic environment. And that obviously can be defined by a whole host of variables. Everybody's situation is a little different. But what we hear are things like, I was scared a lot of the time, or it was really chaotic, or I never really knew what was going to happen next, or I had to be so focused on kind of how this person was going to respond or what that person was going to do to retaliate, that then it really kind of takes the child away from themselves, their own experiences, their own feelings, because they're having to really manage this chaotic or stressful environment. They're having to be really hyper vigilant, having to shut down a lot of their own authentic processes, because it's just the family environment isn't safe in that emotional and psychological way. So that's one thing. I mean, we just see it all the time.
Absolutely. And another thing that we see is what we've alluded to before, is that the temperament tends to be what is called highly sensitive. And that's not a pejorative term. What that means is
wonderful.
Well, it is. And actually, it is actually a neurological condition. So that means that you feel things more deeply. And that's both the good and the bad. So you feel love more deeply. You tend to have more creativity and more passion. And at the same time, if there are things that wound you, or if, like Dr. Ashley is saying, there's chaos, or there's stress, or there's, you know, dysfunction, or sometimes trauma or abuse, your system is going to register that in a more activating manner than somebody else, right?
Maybe your sibling or your parent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so when that is happening, a child needs to do something with their emotions. And we know that one of the very first things that actually physiologically calms us down is food.
Yeah, it's also one of the, I always say, like the age appropriate drug of choice, if you will. So, I mean, it's, I guess another component that we find is that people will say, you know, when I think about when I first started using food, not in a compulsive or binging way, but just
In a
really,
comforting-
just
in a
use it for comforting. I mean, almost always I hear between age 4 and 6.
Yeah.
And so, those really early tender years when, if you're this highly sensitive person, you're feeling things very deeply, your environment is feeling unsettling to you for whatever reason, and then food is there and food is available. And it works really darn well. I mean, just from a biochemical perspective, that's one of the things we get into the workshops, is looking at neurologically and biochemically. It works. So it reinforces that strategy of when I'm feeling distressed and I can't get calm because my environment can't offer that. I don't know how to do that within myself because I'm 5. I do know that I can go and sneak some food and eat it and feel better. So it's another thing that we see over and over and over again.
Yeah. And kind of along those lines of what makes food so appealing is that oftentimes in the histories of people who develop emotional and binge eating is for various reasons. There is a lack of healthy responsiveness on the part of the parent, and that can be a number of different things. It can be a parent that minimizes your feelings. So if you have a child that says, I'm scared, or I'm hurt, or I'm sad, but then you have a parent that says, oh, that's nothing to be sad about. Why?
What's the matter with you?
Or I'll give you something to be sad about, right?
Yeah.
So
don't be such a baby.
Don't be such a baby. You're too sensitive, right?
Why can't you be like your brother?
Exactly. So there's not like a healthy responsiveness. Sometimes a parent might be an alcoholic. Sometimes a parent might be depressed. And so they are completely like maybe flat or depleted within themselves. Sometimes there's too many children in the family and they're just as under parenting.
Or resources are limited and the parents have to be away working.
They're working.
Again, not malintent, just that is the situation. And this poor little kiddo's trying to manage these huge emotions.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the feelings are occurring. There is a highly sensitive temperament, and then there is absolutely no healthy response or any healthy modeling for how to comfort yourself, and then enter food.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So again, there's all sorts of different scenarios, but we have heard over and over and over again that there's part of these components and a number of more, which we're going to actually save for future, and we're going to expand on these
so
concepts.
much.
And I don't know if you're, relating to this. Maybe you can let us know if any of this speaks true to you. But these are again in histories, and I know that there's pieces of this in our own histories as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it really makes sense. And if something makes sense, guess what? It means it can be healed.
Yep. Yeah. And it means that there's a roadmap, out of it because we can understand it. And so, thankfully, the human psyche is also able to heal those past experiences and the feelings that come up with them, and you can create a new template within yourself, which is the greatest news ever. You don't have to be a prisoner of your past, and you don't have to rely on food for the rest of your life. So it's wonderful.
Absolutely.
So that kind of segues into kind of the roadmap that we want to offer for what is the deeper work, right? That was kind of our big question.
Isn't that the title of today?
I think it is. Why we need the deeper work. Yes. So what is it and why do we need it?
Oh my gosh. You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
So we love that now a lot of people are recognizing that there is an emotional eating component to overeating behavior. Okay. So a lot of times, especially in, let's say, like a cognitive behavioral approach, which we all need, we definitely incorporate that in our work, but you start getting a sense of, okay, when I find myself reaching for food and I recognize that I'm not physically hungry, that's going to be part of those intuitive eating skills that our dietitian is going to help you with.
And there's a great question that's come in about that. So for the person who's asked, we'll get to that.
Okay.
I just wanted to acknowledge that it's on the screen.
Okay.
So
Yay, thanks for asking a question.
We'll get
there. Okay. So So we want you to be able to then say, okay, so I'm recognizing that I am feeling overwhelmed. Okay. And when I feel overwhelmed, guess what? I find myself, reaching into the pantry for those chips, just
Is that coming
quiet,
from?
quiet.
We may or may not love tortilla chips when we're overwhelmed.
Safeway has the best tortilla chips. Okay. And so we know that we're feeling overwhelmed. We know that we're eating those chips. And isn't that wonderful? Okay. So that's part of the equation. But if in response to that overwhelm, you have no mechanism to how to step in and to take care of those feelings or take care of those needs, because you've been never shown that, modeled that, you don't have that experience, you can know that you're overwhelmed. And then if someone says, okay, then don't eat, well, the overwhelm is
Then
not going to go away,
Yeah,
right? And so then you're going to be distracting over and over and over and over again. And we know that distracting, that only lasts for so long, and then you're going to end up binge eating, right? Because that's just what happens. And then saying, what the heck is wrong with me? Okay. So in between that, I know that I'm overwhelmed and therefore not wanting to have that compulsion, that drive towards food anymore. There are so many different pieces, being able to tease that overwhelm apart. Like, what are the pieces of what has just occurred that are leading you to feel overwhelmed? Are you allowing yourself in a loving and supportive way then to explore what's making you feel overwhelmed?
I think that's huge, right?
Exactly.
I mean, the rather than the criticism and the judgment.
What's wrong with you? Who gets overwhelmed over that?
Right. Nobody else is overwhelmed.
It's just a talk tomorrow, so what's the big deal, right? So there's all sorts of healing and understanding that needs to be done, kind of rewiring what Dr. Ashley said earlier, like that template, and learning how to be less judgmental and less ridiculing, and instead explore and understand with compassion, and then be able to step in and say, okay, what do I need when I feel overwhelmed? Okay, in a loving, compassionate, self-supportive way, and being able to readily and consistently, meet that need. And guess what? When that happens, that compulsion, that drive that says, I need it, I need it, I need it, it's calling at me from the freezer, that ice cream, it literally will go away. Okay.
It absolutely does. And you know what the really beautiful thing is with clients when they notice that is that they don't really notice it for a while until all of a sudden maybe they're like in our office or they're having an experience and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about food. It's like it just quietly kind of goes away. And then one day you kind of notice that. But that's the genuine, true healing when you're able to rework your own internal response system to those big feelings, and really thinking about yourself as having that little girl or that little boy inside of you and responding to him or her as you would an actual child, responding to her with tenderness and curiosity and compassion rather than this internalized criticism and ridicule that maybe you actually did experience as a little person when you were growing up.
Yeah, and I actually go a step further. And
I
know that you do too. But I actually really know and believe that we still have those parts inside of ourselves. So those parts that got wounded in our childhood are really still active. They're part of our psyche. And when we chronically grow up, we actually step into the psychological parent role.
For those parts.
Those parts. And that's kind of good and that's kind of bad.
Right.
Okay. So if you are harsh and judgmental and rejecting and not loving, you are actually re-wounding, right? So that child part of yourself is not only getting wounded in the here and now, but it's going to join with the past re-wounding in the synergistic way, because your psyche does not know past, present, and future. We're going to go over all of these terms.
This is just a good overview.
But we get the opportunity to really step in and become that loving parent that we might not have had in the manner that we needed. Maybe your parent loved you in the way that they could love you, but maybe it wasn't the way that you needed.
Right.
And now you have the ability to do that for yourself. And when we are loved and cherished and responded to, guess what? Food really doesn't matter that much.
Right.
Okay, food is something that we use to nourish our body. It certainly is something that tastes good at different times.
You can enjoy it.
Yeah, but it's not what makes you feel loved. It's not what makes you feel nurtured or accepted
Good
or
enough.
safe or good enough. Okay, this is the deeper work.
Yep.
Okay, this is what heals. This is, in our experience, what brings you from this chronic overeating and trying to distract and always feeling like you're not successful to, oh my gosh, I'm not thinking about food. I was sad. I let myself cry. I comforted myself. I reached out to a friend. I felt better. And I never thought about pizza once.
Yeah. One of the things that I hear a lot when people are going through this journey and starting to get to the other wonderful side of things is that when they do feel their emotions, they really embrace them and they respect their emotional sensitivity, and they start to get like really convicted about it. And when other people kind of poo-poo it or minimize their emotions, or maybe just have more of a stoic response and kind of like, what's wrong with you that you're getting so emotional? Like, maybe in the past they would apologize for their emotions or think, yeah, I should tone it down. And now they kind of step into this really empowered place of like, there is nothing wrong with my emotions.
Right.
They have
It's
every
lovely.
right to be here, and I'm going to feel them, and I'm going to take care of myself, and I'm going to do what I need to do to get through this situation in a way that works for me. And this sense of like confidence and empowerment, it's genuine, it's beautiful, and it's healing. And that's the piece you're talking about with like going in and really nurturing those younger wounded parts of yourself. It's like you become this loving parent that takes care of them and says, I will give you that space to feel whatever you're feeling, even if the world around us doesn't support that or promote that or nurture that. I will make sure you get that. And you become this wonderful, loving person to yourself.
Yeah. You know, for the people that have been cherished in their childhood, who had safe, nurturing, healthy, mature parents, like that is just the greatest gift that you can experience in life. If you haven't had that experience, you're able to give that to yourself in truly a way that it reworks any emotional deficiencies and heals so that you actually become an adult that feels self-worth, that feels like loved and lovable and proud of yourself, and confident. And guess what? Regardless of your size.
Right.
Okay? It is about valuing from the inside out. Now, that doesn't mean we don't take care of ourselves, right? There's nothing wrong with taking care of yourself, but it doesn't equal your self-worth. Your self-worth is about who you are because you are properly cherished.
Yeah, I was going to say it's an internal peacefulness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
No,
that you
beautiful.
feel when you come home to yourself, like, I really like who I am, and I really like spending time with myself, and I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to take you on this journey.
So I'm sitting here thinking, we are so cheesy sounding, and you know what?
Yeah, we are. But you know what?
That's where it's at. It's genuine and it's
Yeah.
sincere. And when you have had that gift, especially if you haven't, it is beautiful. And this is what drives us every day. This is our impetus for doing this, where now we can reach people across the world. And what a blessing to ourselves to be able to do that. And hopefully it's a gift to you.
Yeah.
And we just really trust you. We are so excited about this journey. We hope some of this material is resonating.
Yeah.
We wanted to share enough that you knew what we were all about. Certainly not everything that we're going to be going into in detail, not only in this wonderful forum, but we're also writing a book.
Yes, we are.
So we'll give you all sorts. We've got so much material that we want to cover, and this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
So.
And